You've seen what's going on behind closed doors with Governor Bill Ritter, your successor, on some of these union issues that they're trying to pull off. Let me go backward in time a little bit. When you were governor, how involved did you get when it came to the issue of citizens' initiatives and trying to decide whether or not to put pressure on before they got onto the ballot?
Well, I was involved. I mean, you and I disagreed on Referendum C, and that was something I worked hard on. I'm not critical of a governor for playing a role on an initiative or a referenda. In this case, think that the business community is making a horrible mistake in apparently giving in to big labor and paying an extortionate amount of money in the process. You might explain to your listeners what we're talking about.
For those who aren't following, the Right to Work initiative, which was put on by Jonathan Coors and Jake Jabs and others, Amendment 47, would bring right to work, make it a little harder for unions to close a shop here in private sector shops. Unions came over with 4 different amendments that, would you agree with me, Governor, that all of these are potential economy killers, from just cause to making criminal offenses for CEOs to health care insurance, and one of my favorite, workplace safety, which sounds so wonderful until you read the language of any of these. Workplace safety, for instance, allows an employee to sue his employer for mental anguish and loss of happiness.
Yeah, it's a trial lawyer's dream, and you're absolutely right, John. Basically, because a couple of individuals put a right to work initiative on the ballot, which big labor didn't like. Big labor, instead of simply moving to defeat that through blackmail, puts 4 extremely damaging to the private sector initiatives on the ballot, and then they're telling the private sector either defeat right to work, get it pulled, or we're going to destroy the private sector in Colorado. That's what your labor unions are doing to you today in Colorado.
It seemed to me that originally their goal was to get the right to work guys to back off. You drop your one initiative, we'll drop our 4 economy killing initiatives, but the backers of right to work won't do so, so they've worked out a deal, it looks like, and maybe you can shed some light on this, that if business leaders give the unions some money to work against right to work, the unions will drop these ridiculous initiatives.
John, it's unconstitutional and it's a felony. It causes you to be expelled from the Colorado House or Senate if you trade your vote. If somebody comes up to you and says, Senator, if you'll vote for my bill, I'll vote for yours, that gets you expelled from the legislature. I know because I was in the legislature for 12 years. What is happening is labor unions are saying to the private sector, you give us $2 million and we'll drop our 4 initiatives. And that $2 million would go to a 501c3, so-called education group, which would then try to defeat right to work. I call it extortion. I think it's wrong. I'm very much against the 4 anti-business initiatives that big labor put on, but I don't negotiate with kidnappers. I wouldn't negotiate with people who are trying to blackmail me or the state, and that's exactly what the Denver Chamber and Colorado Concern are doing today.
And those are the 2 business organizations that are in negotiations with the unions. So let me play devil's advocate for you for just a second. All right, so I'm part of the business community. I can't get right to work to get off the ballot, which is what I would like, because then these 4 killers would go away. I'm looking at these 4 initiatives, any one of which could drive businesses running like out of the state like fugitives. And for $2 million, I could give it to some other organization, and all of a sudden, these 4 initiatives that I would have to spend, I don't know, $10, $20 million trying to kill, and might not even be successful, go away. Now, as a businessman, I'm thinking, $2 million, these things go away. Well, that sounds like a pretty good deal. Explain to me why you think in the long run that would be a bad deal.
Well, I think it's extortion, and I think it's the principle of the thing. And I think what the private sector and the business community needs to do is it needs to tell the Democratic elected officials who are close to labor that they need to pressure labor to drop these 4 initiatives. There are a number of Democratic politicians who are trying to broker this deal with the private sector, get the private sector to buy off big labor, And I would if I was in the private sector, and or if I were governor. I'd be telling my friends in the Democratic Party, you guys need to get labor to drop these initiatives because it's going to be damaging to the state of Colorado, and it's time for some leadership from them. And they haven't gotten it, and so now the Democratic elected officials are, in fact, meeting on almost a nightly basis with big labor and with Colorado Concern and the Denver Chamber trying to get this $2 million ransom to be paid. Our president would never pay a ransom. If you're a diplomat or a member of our military and you're kidnapped, the government is not going to pay a ransom to your kidnappers. It's a fundamental principle. And John, if we do this time, anytime anybody tries to put something on the ballot that labor doesn't like, they're simply going to blackmail the private sector. And I think it's a bad principle. I don't like it, and I wouldn't do it.
There's also another part of this that I know this statistic is going to surprise you. We took a look at the $4 million that labor spent back in 2006 on partisan races, and roughly 99.5% of that money went to, hold on to your hats, to Democrats. Right. So the idea that business people will give unions or some union-type organization or union-sympathetic organization a couple $1 million, that money is only going to be used, if it's not used to kill the initiatives they don't like, it's only going to be used in the other way.
It's, if I'm a Republican legislator and I see what's happening, and because of the private sector bowing down to big labor's intimidation, it means that labor has an extra $2 million that otherwise it would have had to spend to defeat the Right to Work initiative, now going against them. I mean, those Republican legislators ought to be looking at the Denver Chamber of Commerce and Colorado Concern and saying, next time you need your interests voted on at the legislature, why don't you go to the Democrats and ask them to take these tough votes for the private sector? Because it's always the Republican legislators that are standing up for the interest of the private sector, and this is the thanks they get. Big labor getting in bed with the Denver Chamber of Commerce and Colorado Concern to bail out the lack of leadership that we're seeing from the Democratic Party in terms of getting labor to drop these initiatives.